Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Those who are vying to replace Rachel Notley as Alberta NDP leader held a debate in Lethbridge last night, and Bridge City News was there to hear concerns from the candidates. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling out the Alberta NDP leadership hopefuls to see where they stand on the federal carbon tax. And massive flooding in Tanzania has claimed around 155 lives and left more than 200,000 people homeless.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The race to replace Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley is well underway. All 5 leadership candidates were in Lethbridge on Thursday night, squaring off in the first of 3 official debates across the province. As BCN's Naveen Day reports now, it was a pretty solid turnout.
Contestants vying to lead the Alberta NDP took part in the party's first official debate of the leadership race, which was held at the Yates Memorial Theatre Thursday evening. Attendees were given an opportunity to hear from all the candidates in attendance and to see who they think can lead the party and bring them to government in 2027. Here are some of the highlights of what the candidates shared. First up was Kathleen Ganley. She says that affordability and caring about climate change can go hand in hand.
I think what we can do better than the UCP is make it clear to people that they don't have to make a choice between feeding their kids and making progress on climate change.
Sarah Hoffman's campaign comes with a bold promise to bring 1,000 doctors to the province and to bring back the days from when she was health minister. Make it boring again.
We didn't have scandals. Every major municipality in Alberta, you could get a family doctor. The good news is I was at the table and I struck those deals with doctors. And when we negotiated, because we had such a good relationship built on trust, they actually returned their retention bonuses so that we could invest it back in the system and do it together.
Jody Callahoo Stonehouse did not hide her passion for the importance of water in our province. She fired shots at the Alberta Energy Regulator, holding them responsible for pollution on Alberta's reserves.
The water is contaminated with polycyclic aryl hydrocarbons, arsenic, methylmercury, cadmium, which are carcinogens that cause cancer. We look at Fort Chipewyan in the 1980s, 2000. They discovered that cancer was at a higher rate of 30% downstream from the Alberta oil sands because we were not doing our job with the Alberta Energy Regulator.
After the event, candidates had a chance to speak with the media. Naheed Nenshi said the relationship between the Alberta NDP and its federal counterpart needs to be re-examined.
I think that a lot of the things that we've heard, for example, the conversation around the relationship between the federal and the provincial NDP, and this is something that has been brought up to me constantly by candidates, by campaigners, by others. And these are the kinds of things that you just got to surface. And sometimes a newcomer to the dinner table can help identify what some of the issues in the family are.
McGowan criticized Nenshi for his statements, saying that while he and Nenshi want to revolutionize the NDP, McGowan's plan is much more rooted in the party's interests.
He's talking about severing ties with the federal party. He's talking about changing the name. He's talking about changing the Constitution. It's true that I'm also a candidate who wants to revolutionize the party, but I actually want to revolutionize it by taking it back to its roots, by reestablishing it as a party that welcomes working people.
And McGowan wasn't the only one who tried to get under the skin of frontrunner Naheed Nenshi. Kathleen Ganley said the time to act is now, not in 3 years.
I did ask him a couple of good questions. I talked about the fact that I think that how we win over Albertans, how we win the election in 2027 is by putting forward ideas. And I don't think we do need to wait 3 years. I know right now that we're in an affordability crisis. I know right now that most people can't afford their rent or their mortgage.
Voting on the NDP leadership begins on June the 3rd. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on all of the Alberta NDP candidates to make their positions known and clear when it comes to the carbon tax. Chris Sims, the Alberta director of the CTF, says when the Alberta NDP was back in power back in 2015, they created a provincial carbon tax which cost taxpayers more than $1 billion before it was finally scrapped in 2019. She says all of the leadership hopefuls should make their positions clear right now when it comes to the very unpopular federal levy.
So, as we know, the federal carbon tax is costing the average Alberta family more than $900 this year, even with the rebates factored in. And that was the parliamentary budget officer that figured out that math. So, this is a big, expensive, costly tax. And so, we think it's really important for all the NDP leadership candidates to be on the record. Are they for or against the carbon tax? And what do they think about a provincial carbon tax happening here at home again?
Alberta NDP leadership hopeful Jody Calhoun-Stonehouse says when it comes to the federal carbon tax, big industry and not the average everyday Albertan should be penalized.
It doesn't make sense to penalize citizens. That's not the strategy. And what we've seen with the carbon tax is that it hasn't been implemented in a way that it's working. It needs to be polluter pay. If an industry is polluting, they need to be held accountable. If they're not going to clean it up, then you pay, and then we hire folks to clean it up. So when we think about the carbon tax, it's not about penalizing citizens. It's about holding industry accountable that is polluting our water and our airspace and causing harm for our children and grandchildren.
Be sure to catch the full interview with Alberta NDP leadership hopeful Jody Calhoun-Stonehouse and myself coming up in the second half of our program. Alberta's Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz is not happy with her federal counterpart. Stephen Guilbeault announced that Ottawa is putting a cap on the production of plastics here in Canada. Schultz says by doing so, that's a slap in the face to Alberta and our province's petrochemical industry, which has thousands of Albertans working in it. She says Alberta is positioned to lead the world when it comes to the production of carbon-neutral plastics. Schultz says Guilbeault's proposal would risk billions in investments, including projects such as Dow Chemical's net zero petrochemical plant in Fort Saskatchewan, which is a $9 billion project that will create thousands of jobs. Now, the Organization for Economic Cooperation says global plastic production grew from 234 million tons in 2000 to 460 million tons in 2019. Plastic waste, meanwhile, grew from 156 million to 353 million tons. The OECD says more than 80% of plastic waste ends up in the landfills. Alberta Education Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides says elementary school students and teachers will benefit from the province's new curriculum. He says the information received from parents, teachers, and education partners since August of last year helped to develop a new K-6 social studies curriculum. He says it'll focus on building critical thinking skills and empowering students to become more engaged.
In terms of next steps, Alberta Education is now formally inviting all school boards to help us fine-tune the curriculum by piloting it this September. Piloting enables teachers and students to engage with the new curriculum and provide valuable feedback about how it works in the classroom. The piloting period will run from September of this year to June 2025. And school boards will have flexibility to determine how they are involved in piloting. This means that they can choose to pilot all or some of the draft curriculum. They can decide how many teachers will participate in the process and how many learning outcomes they will work with.
The Alberta Teachers Association was really not impressed with the province's announcement and has asked to pause piloting the K-6 social studies curriculum. ATA President Jason Schilling says teachers' recommendations are not reflected in the most recent draft and, quote, let's take the time needed to get it right and ready for the classroom. Our province's Agriculture and Irrigation Minister announced new funding for Alberta's water management program. R.J. Sigerson says $50 million from Budget 2024 will go towards vital projects, including completing Phase 2 of the Dixon Dam Spillway Enhancement Project.
The project boosts the discharge capacity of the auxiliary spillway for the dam, which allows water to be safely discharged out of the Glenifer Reservoir during extreme floods. This means increasing the spillway capacity to 4,900 cubic meters per second from 2,800 cubic meters per second. Construction crews will also make dam and dike upgrades. Alberta's government plans to work on Phase 2 of the project this summer, and we hope to have it completed by the fall of 2026.
Well, we had lots of cloud cover today and fairly warm across much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Roche is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, how's the weekend shaping up so far?
Yeah, not bad. We are seeing relatively seasonal temperatures, looking at a high of 12 degrees on Saturday. Also, we are seeing some very overcast skies beginning tonight near midnight and then lasting right through Saturday. We are also seeing a wind from the south at 20, gusting to 40 kilometers per hour. But after that, we should be seeing a sunny Sunday and temperatures rising back into the teens there. So I'll be back later in the show to share some of that good news with you, Hal.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan responded to a new bill being introduced by the province, which would give the Alberta government the power to fire municipal councillors and postpone elections. The proposed law would also give the province sweeping powers to overturn bylaws. Municipal Affairs Minister Rick McIver said the new powers are justified to ensure fair elections and accountability from municipal leaders. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan says he and council need a little bit of time to look over some of the changes the province wants to make.
Lots of questions out there and lots of frustration. We do want to hear more. It is first reading. Now, understand it is first reading. That gets it on the table. However, when second reading comes, we're hoping that there's a lot of conversation prior to passing of a second or third reading. So a little surprised on how many. There was a lot. There was a lot of changes. And again, I'm highlighting like crazy. I'm sure I burnt out a couple highlighters already here till 2 in the morning here trying to figure out, what some of those changes are.
A couple of weeks ago, the province announced introducing a bill that would give it the power to veto any deal between the federal government and provincial entities, including municipalities and post-secondary institutions. From bike paths to bridge walkways to how prepared our fire department is, the City of Lethbridge was busy giving and receiving information from the public last night. Close to 50 different City of Lethbridge projects were on display at the NMAC Centre from various city departments during the biannual community conversations. The purpose is for the public to garner information, ask questions, and give their 2 cents about various departments and urban revitalization projects the city is undertaking.
This is one way, we do these annually to bring all the projects together in one place. So you don't have to go to 6 different open houses throughout the year. You can come to one place and give your feedback on a whole bunch of things. I mean, being springtime, it's some of the hot topics really are cycling, we know, is a big one. We've got some downtown cycling lanes that are brand new this year, so people have lots of questions about that. I think the parks booths have been really busy as well. People are thinking about getting out and on our pathways and in our parks, and so just looking at the new pathways and things that they have planned there.
We've been getting a lot of positive feedback about the bike lanes. There's of course a few people that disagree with them as well, so we've had a few of each side. It's been nice that some of the concerns that we're hearing about are some of the concerns that have been addressed already. So we have the snow clearing, which we've changed our operations in how the bike lanes get cleared, and we've also are still hearing about the accessibility issues.
So we're showing off some of our new UTV, our riverboat. We're trying to show the public kind of who we are, what we do. If we can recruit, that'd be great. The questions we're getting, a lot of it's just, what is this piece of equipment? What's that? We're getting questions about what are we doing to prep for the wildfire situations that's going around, which we do have wildland training that's happening, which is a new initiative here in Lethbridge. Over the last couple of years we've been doing that, so it's definitely getting better that way. We're much more prepared than we have been ever.
According to city officials, a feedback evaluation survey on the event was given to participants. Feedback will be shared on the city's Get Involved website. Well, the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen is in dire need of volunteers right now. The group's executive director, Bill Ginther, says as the need for food grows, so does the need to have more people on hand to dish out the food.
That we need some more people, we don't have quite enough. So the idea is people can go online. We do all of the bookings online on our website, lethbridgesoupkitchen.ca. We have been in operation for almost 40 years. Our role here is primarily or only to provide hot and nutritious meals for the homeless population in our city. We do that 3 times a day, every day except Sunday. We do the brunch and then the evening meal. We're seeing about 150 to 175 people per meal every day. So we do between 11 and 12,000 meals every month.
I've been working at the Soup Kitchen for 10 years. This is an opportunity to give back to my community, to lend a helping hand to those that need a helping hand.
The Lethbridge Soup Kitchen has been serving many of our city's most vulnerable for close to 4 decades now. This Sunday will mark the 25th year anniversary of a tragedy that took place in the town of Taber, Alberta. Back on April 28th of 1999, a 14-year-old boy walked into W.R. Myers High School and began shooting. He shot and killed 17-year-old Jason Lang and injured another student who fortunately survived. According to reports at the time, a gym coach wrestled the shooter to the ground. He was arrested by a Taber constable who was also the school's resource officer. Taber Mayor Andrew Prokop was a police officer when the incident occurred, and he says it's a tragedy the town will not soon forget.
Well, as you know, it was a very tragic situation that occurred there with that school shooting, and it was difficult for the whole community, the Taber Police Service, the schools involved, and the community at large, community area. So that's a very difficult thing, no matter where something like that occurs. But it affected Taber a great deal, as it would anywhere. So that was a very unfortunate situation that occurred, and I believe in the end it was dealt with as best as could be possible, but it was certainly a difficult time for the entire community and area.
This tragedy came 8 days after the mass shooting at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, where one teacher and 14 students were killed, including the two shooters. An Edmonton police officer with the RCMP has been charged with child sexual exploitation offenses following an alert investigation. 33-year-old Evan Peacock, a constable stationed at the St. Paul detachment, was arrested on Thursday. He's been charged with 2 counts each of possessing and distributing child pornography. He's a 3-year member of the RCMP and has been suspended with pay. Alert's investigation began in November of last year when Peacock allegedly uploaded 2 videos depicting child sexual exploitation to Snapchat. A large number of pro-Israeli demonstrators gathered at Columbia University in New York today, rallying for the release of the remaining hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza.
Our active terror may have ended on October 7th, but they are still victims of terror, being terrorized on a daily basis for 203 days.
A group of American and Israeli rabbis were arrested as they demonstrated in southern Israel near the Gaza border. They were demanding a ceasefire and the delivery of aid to the Strip.
One of the reasons we're doing this right now is that we're in the middle of Passover. Many of us, including myself, are rabbis, and a big part of the Passover celebration is about food. The main symbol of Passover that everybody knows is matzah. Matzah, the unleavened bread, is a symbol of both the difficulty of the exodus, of having to leave Egypt so quickly, but it's also a symbol of freedom. And what this means is that even in this moment, we are not providing the Gazan people with the basic fundamentals they need to be able to even envision liberation like we had from Egypt. Passover is the season of our liberation, and we want it to be a season of liberation for all people, because no people are free unless all people are free.
Massive flooding in Tanzania caused by weeks of heavy rain has killed 155 people and has affected more than 200,000 others. Government officials say that is more than the number of deaths reported 2 weeks ago as the amount of rainfall increases, especially in the coastal region and the capital. More than 10,000 homes have been severely damaged by what the Prime Minister is calling heavy El Niño rains. The floods have also caused landslides and severe damage to the country's crops. Praying for the people of Tanzania. Well, we could actually use some moisture here in southwestern Alberta. It has been so very dry. So if you like the warm, dry conditions, you may love this weekend's forecast. All of the weather details are coming up. You know, if you're planning a hike through the coulees or a walk maybe around Henderson Lake in Lethbridge, it should be a nice weekend for it. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it appears as though we may enjoy a decent weekend after all here in southwestern Alberta.
Yeah, not bad at all. We have cloudy skies and a seasonal 12 degrees on Saturday before heading back up into those teens there. 16 for a high on Sunday with lots of sunshine as well. Mix of sun and cloud throughout the rest of the week, but highs of 15 on Monday, 13 on Tuesday, back up to 15 on Wednesday, and a lovely 17 degrees expected next Thursday. So the average high for this time of year is 15 degrees, average low 1 degree. 27, that was where we were sitting back in 1992. It was a hot one, that's for sure. That was the record high. Record low was -13 back in 1967. Sun rose this morning at 6:16 and our sun set this evening at 8:43 p.m. We're getting so close to that 14 and a half hour mark. 14 hours, 27 minutes of daylight, 4 minutes longer than we saw yesterday. Okay, so we're looking at rainy conditions on the west coast tomorrow. 30% chance in the morning, 70% chance in the afternoon. In Victoria, high of 12 degrees. Also 60K winds in those Juan de Fuca Straits there. 10 degrees for high in Vancouver, and looking at some showers as well, and windy conditions, a little bit windier by the water, about 30K. 19 for a high in Edmonton, seeing scattered clouds and up to 40K winds. Calgary, clear skies there, 17 for a high. And then as we get to the rest of the prairies, we are seeing mainly clear conditions in Saskatoon, high of 17 degrees. 17, same thing for Regina, up to 40K winds there, up to 60K winds in Winnipeg. And Winnipeg seeing drizzle ending in the morning, high of 9 degrees. As we get into the central part of the country, Toronto's high tomorrow sitting at 15 degrees and seeing periods of rain. Also a risk of a thunderstorm there in Toronto. Periods of rain also expected tomorrow in Ottawa, high of 17, and a lovely 18 degrees expected in Montreal tomorrow with clear skies once those clouds clear up a little bit there. On the East Coast, mainly sunny skies, 17 for a high in Fredericton, 13 in Halifax, 9 in Charlottetown, and only 3 degrees expected tomorrow in St. John's, becoming cloudy throughout the day. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
A court in Newfoundland and Labrador has fined Calgary-based Cenovus Energy $2.5 million. It stems from one of the largest oil spills in the province's history. Cenovus has a month to pay up. The 2018 spill from a Cenovus Energy connector in the White Rose oil field released around 250,000 litres of oil into the ocean, around 250 kilometres from St. John's. Politicians and union leaders say jobs for Canadian workers must be protected at new electric vehicle plants. Canada's Building Trade Union says Canadian workers are being sidelined in favour of foreign workers at the Nexstar battery plant in Windsor, Ontario. The plant is owned by Stellantis and LG Energy Solution. Federal Conservatives and New Democrats are demanding Ottawa address the issue. Both Stellantis and the federal government say foreign workers account for just 72 jobs, and specialized equipment is being installed that Canadians will be taught to use. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 83 points on the day to finish at 21,969. The Dow was up 153 points to 38,239. The S&P 500 was up 51 on the day to 5,099, and the Nasdaq was up 316 points to 15,927. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 10 cents to 83.67 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to $1.61 US. Gold was up $5.79 on the day to $23.3825 US an ounce, and silver was down 23 cents to $27.20 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel, barley's at $6.42, canola's at $14.10, and corn is at $7.92 per bushel. Live cattle were up 73 cents to $184.68. Feeder cattle May contract was up $2.45 to $248.70, and lean hogs May contract was down $1 to $94.28. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73 cents US. Recapping one of our top stories, the 5 leadership hopefuls for the Alberta NDP discuss some of the hot-button issues Albertans are facing at the 8th Theatre in Lethbridge on Thursday night. Everything from health care to education, the environment, and even the economy was discussed. This was the first of 3 debates for the party's candidates. The Alberta NDP will choose their new leader to succeed Rachel Notley on June the 22nd. You know, one of the Alberta NDP leadership hopefuls, Jody Callahoo-Stonehouse, says the carbon tax should not be penalizing the average everyday Albertans, but instead the Fed should be targeting big industry. She'll explain in more detail in our exclusive one-on-one interview with her coming up in just a few moments. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. 5 people are hoping to be the one to replace Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley on June the 22nd. Now, one of the candidates is MLA for Edmonton-Rutherford and a member of the Mitchell First Nation Treaty 6, Jody Callahoo-Stonehouse joins us now from Edmonton. Jody, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Hal. It's great to be with you all.
You bet. Now, Jody, explain why you think you are the best candidate for the job to replace Rachel Notley.
Well, it's some tough competition for folks to have to decide, but really what it comes down to is who is going to look after all Albertans, who has the skill set and the compassion, the integrity, and the drive to beat Danielle Smith in the UCP and then to clean up the mess. And undoubtedly, that is me.
Let me ask you something, though. You got a pretty big name candidate in Ahead Nenshi, former Calgary mayor. Some people says, it brings a little bit of star power here. How do you beat a name like that in a leadership race?
Well, he does bring star power, and he was the mayor. But we just have to look at his record, and we have to look at the time that we're at. And right now, we are facing a climate crisis, a water crisis, the drought. And my first policy I released was around water protection and allocation, because it is foundational to how all of our industries, our agriculture, our irrigation, oil and gas, everything we do revolves around water, and that is essential. So our governance must place priority on that. And I'm the only candidate who has done that, and it's essential to Alberta thriving and surviving.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of dryness this past winter, a lot of drought, not a lot of snowpack in the mountains. So let's flesh out the water agenda a little bit more here. One of your objectives would be to introduce the Albertans' Right to Water Act. Can you explain what this is really all about?
Yeah, as I said, our economic systems rely on water. And right now, we have agreements. The provincial government sat down and we have these agreements, but that's not enough. And so the act itself talks about ways we are going to sit with ranchers, farmers, industry, communities, municipalities, and have these contracts solidified, but also we need to invest in innovation. That is essential to reducing our water use. How are we going to be innovative? And also building an institute of excellence in Lethbridge. We need to invest in academic rigor, the way our young people are. This is the crisis of their generation. We have to give them the investment, the tools, and the resource to solve this crisis. And it is a crisis. It is a water crisis. Let's be honest. We're at stage 4, and stage 5 is detrimental. And we have cattle to ensure that we have crops to grow. We've got oil and gas we need to continue to process. We want to keep the energy in houses. We want food in the fridge. And so this policy is foundational in ensuring Albertans have access to the resources we need. We want to make sure that the future generation, not just us, but our children and our grandchildren, can also survive and thrive on these beautiful lands.
Now, your plan would also involve establishing a center of excellence at the University of Lethbridge to invest in the research, development, and commercialization of innovative water technologies. So, Jody, why here in Lethbridge?
Well, we know that the water drought is going to be the most dangerous in southern Alberta. We already know the snowpack, as you mentioned earlier, is the lowest it's ever been. The soil, the moisture is the driest it's been recorded in 105 years. We had the hottest March ever recorded in history. And we've seen down in the rivershed, down below in the Bow, that it's the lowest it's ever been. And so we have to invest where the crisis is. We want to make sure that the solution is going to be where it's relevant, so we can ensure that southern ranchers and southern farmers and industry in the south, so that cities like Lethbridge and all the beautiful towns around there, Okotoks, we know they're going to have a huge water problem. We have to make sure that people down in the south are thriving with water. And that's why the investment in Lethbridge, because the crisis is going to hit there the hardest.
Now, you are currently the opposition critic for environment, parks, and climate resilience. What would your priorities be in the area of climate change?
Well, of course, water is foundational, and then we got to look at carbon capture, and we have to really invest in Albertans. We have to invest in our labor and our talent recruitment, and we have to do things a little differently. We're already doing things. We have to double down on renewables. We have this moratorium, which has caused huge harm in investment. We have to bring those investors back into Alberta. We have to stabilize our economy because we know many of our systems are broken, the healthcare, the education. And in order to fix those, we need money, which means our economic systems have to be sound, which means energy. Alberta has been the source, the number one economic source around the world because of our oil and gas and our energy. Double down on our renewables, which means getting geothermal. We're already experts in drilling. Geothermal is just another form of drilling. Norway gets 72% of their total power through geothermal, through steam power. So having geothermal, having our wind turbines up and thriving and running properly, getting our solar panels up and making sure we're doing carbon capture, turning the climate crisis into climate economics. That is what is going to make Alberta a global leader and competitor in the market economy, is turning our crisis into our economic system so that we are thriving as Albertans. We need to make sure Albertans have jobs, that families are able to give, the affordability crisis. Part of the part of being on tour with people and going around with Albertans is people are devastated. People are losing their jobs. They can't afford, they're making decisions between utilities and groceries. So we have to increase the economics of our province, and that means doubling down on renewables.
I'm glad you brought up the oil and gas sector and the renewables. Jody, how do you create that synergy there and that proper balance? Because as you know, the energy sector, oil and gas, employs thousands of Albertans, and then there's also the renewables and opportunity in that regard. So how do you kind of put eggs in both baskets here? Create that synergy.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Hal. We've got to make the basket bigger and make the basket whole, and all of those systems of energies are what are going to provide for Albertans. It's not this or that, it's all of it. We are going to need all of it. And when pressure was put on oil and gas to reduce their water consumption, because historically it took 5 barrels of water to process a barrel of crude. Now they are down to 1 barrel of water per barrel of crude, which is a substantial accomplishment. And they did it. And they can do it again. And Syncrude and Suncor, they are going to be partners in how we diversify our economy. They also know they want to do things differently because everyone wants their grandchildren to be able to survive and have clean drinking water and air they can breathe. We don't want forest fires all summer. No one wants that. So industry also is just as deeply invested in the transformation. And now we need a government that supports industry, that supports our workers, and that unifies the energy sector. And that's what I'm going to do as leader.
So affordability and economic stability is always an issue here in Alberta. You have an interesting proposal you're calling the Alberta Royalty Dividend. Jody, explain how that works.
Well, we have to act like owners of our resource. When we think about when Lougheed was in government, we were getting 27 cents per dollar when the oil was big, and now we're down to 20 cents. We are owners of this resource. Let's act like owners. And that means ensuring the royalties are getting to Albertans, ensuring the royalties are getting in your pockets as Albertans. Because right now we are seeing huge profit margins going to CEOs outside of employees being paid and staff being paid. And we have not seen a raise for staff workers and employees of oil and gas, but we have seen existential amounts of money leaving the province and the country in profit margins, when those profits belong to Albertans in our province and in our territory. That means reallocating and renegotiating agreements with industry to ensure Albertans are getting their share of their royalties, of their resource. But it also means we are going to be accountable for our resource and clean up our mess. With record profits that we've seen, we also have record pollution, which means about being innovative and creating an industry, creating jobs for Albertans to clean up the contamination. We've seen record profits with record contamination. means let's create this as an opportunity. Let's create jobs for Albertans.
You know, recent polls have showed that the majority of Canadians are dead set against the carbon tax. It's hurt so many industries, including our farmers that use natural gas to heat their barns, dry their grains, and so forth. What are your thoughts when it comes to the federal carbon tax?
It doesn't make sense to penalize citizens. That's not the strategy. And what we've seen with the carbon tax is that it hasn't been implemented in a way that it's working. It needs to be polluter pay. If an industry is polluting, they need to be held accountable. If they're not going to clean it up, then you pay and then we hire folks to clean it up. So when we think about the carbon tax, it's not about penalizing citizens, it's about holding industry accountable that is polluting our water and our airspace and causing harm for our children and grandchildren. So, yes, it can work, but we need to get the science so that we are tracking pollution properly and that we are holding industry. So, I believe in polluter pay.
So in other words, let's change the focus and not penalize the average everyday Albertan. Jody, when someone buys a membership with the provincial NDP, you automatically become a member with the federal NDP. And they're connected. Now, some people don't really like the idea of being connected to Jagmeet Singh. He hasn't really been much of an opposition leader, some people would argue, and propping up and supporting the Liberal government here. So how can you create some separation, or do you even want that from the federal NDP?
Well, I think that's a very important decision to be made, Hal, by the members of the New Democrat Party. That is a decision that needs to be made by all the caucus members, by MLAs, and by the members of the party itself. That is to be up for debate. We need to flush it out. Are we connected? Are we relevant? Are we relational? Are we doing good work together? Do we have the same values? Will this change when a new leader for the federal party changes? These are questions we have to talk about and be honest with one another. And as the leader, I will make the decision based on how the citizens choose.
Now, Jody, being a First Nations person, what are your thoughts on achieving reconciliation, not only here in Alberta, but across the country?
Oh, Hal, this is such an important question. And we're seeing such amazing work transform around the country and in Alberta. We're seeing so many acts of reconciliation where communities are working together. We see it down south in Lethbridge. We're seeing it up north. We're seeing, Indigenous knowledge and wisdom. I mean, we've been living sustainably on our homelands for time immemorial. And so now it's time to draw on that ancestral knowledge so that all of us can survive as our ancestors intended when they sat together in treaty. As long as the sun shines and the grass grows, we're supposed to live together as relatives. Well, the rivers are going to stop flowing. So, what are we going to do as relatives to fix the problem for all of us? And this really is about reconciliation. It's about ensuring that all of our children and grandchildren have a bright future right here in our beautiful province.
And that everybody has access to clean drinking water. That's key as well, right? Now, Jody, the housing crisis continues across the nation. There seems to be debate within party ranks as to whether or not rent control would bring a net benefit to Albertans. How do you see it?
Rent control, as I see it, is a band-aid to a systemic issue. Let's put on a band-aid to stop the hemorrhaging, but let's get to the root of the issue, which is affordability and creating housing that is affordable. And as government, with record profits, we can invest in affordable housing and then build wraparound services because we know in Alberta, we have folks with complex needs that need to be supported. Housing just isn't enough. So providing folks with the supports, we have more children than ever before in our history in child welfare. That means we're doing something wrong. So we have to create systems of support that create healthy families so they can thrive, so they can live together and afford to pay their bills. Poverty is the crippler. People can't afford housing and groceries. That's what causes the harm. So addressing affordability is essential, which is why getting to the root of it is our resources, ensuring we have equity, ensuring we're investing in our talent and our youth, creating jobs for people so that people can, have these wonderful families. That's the goal for all Albertans. We all want to have our family in our home. So let's make it possible. And it is possible. We are the richest province in the country. We have to make our priority us.
Now, when it comes to healthcare, Jody, what kind of changes would you like to see to be most beneficial for Albertans?
Growing up with my dad being a paramedic and a nurse, and my grandmother a nurse, and my cousin a doctor, I have listened to stories of the degradation ever since the nuns left the healthcare, the cleaning, and now we are at a crisis where families are waiting on hours upon hours to see a doctor. And some families in the rural areas have to drive up to 8 hours to see a doctor. That's not acceptable. That's not okay. So, the work we have to do, first of all, is get our doctors back from British Columbia. We have to respect them, offer contracts that are meaningful. We want doctors in the rural, we want doctors in the city. We also have to respect our nurses, the helpers, right down to the people who clean the floors in the hospitals. Their jobs are just as essential and important, which means having respectful negotiations, making sure that they are being paid appropriately, that their contracts are solidified, and working with people in the system to build it, trusting the experts. Bureaucrats and politicians are not experts in healthcare. We have to trust the people who are the experts and believe in them and build and repair the systems with them.
Jody Callahoo Stonehouse is the MLA for Edmonton Rutherford and one of 5 candidates vying to replace Rachel Notley as the leader of the Alberta NDP. Jody, thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
Thank you, Hal, and thank you to everyone at Bridge City. See you soon.
Well, growing up a generation ago was very different than it is for kids today. And certainly social media has had both a positive and negative impact on our kids. We see too many young people who have become couch potatoes or even game chair potatoes, as I say, and don't know how to communicate without a device. But we're also seeing kids who are becoming world changers. So how can we influence our children to be in that latter camp? Well, joining us to discuss this is Dr. Tim Elmore. He's the author of 35 books, including his newest release. It's the he's the best-selling author of I Can't Wait, 52 Stories of Kids Who Changed Their World that you can read together. He's also the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders and has spoken to 500,000 business leaders, universities, athletes, and nonprofits. Wow. He joins me now from Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Elmore, welcome back to Bridge City News. You are a busy, busy guy.
Well, you're busy as well, but yeah, I'm not getting bored these days, that's for sure.
Right. Okay. So you do a lot, but let's talk about your latest book. So what inspired you to write I Can't Wait? Is this strictly for children?
No, not at all. In fact, it's something kids can benefit from, but I really thought about families, maybe even teachers in a classroom, maybe even a coach on a field, but it's 52 stories, so one a week for a whole year that you can begin to talk about kids with your kids who did something amazing to solve problems and serve people. But I thought because it's harder and harder for moms and dads to connect with their kids at 13 years old, let's say, and the kids, as you mentioned, Jeanette, are often very much at home with a screen, but not face to face with another person. I thought, what if we told redemptive stories, had a discussion, a conversation that might inspire your kid on that sofa maybe to get up and do something themselves with their gifts. So that's my goal. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. The sofas, the gaming chairs. Let's get those kids out there. So considering your years of experience in developing and equipping leaders, so how would you say the current generation of children differs these days from previous generations?
Well, one obvious one is they have a very high sense of agency. And what I mean by that is they feel very empowered, probably by a smartphone. I feel like I know it all and I'm 12, that sort of thing. And sometimes they do, it's amazing. But along with that high sense of agency, Jeanette, there's a high sense of anxiety. They're often overwhelmed with all that they consume on that smartphone. So it's oxymoronic, high agency, high anxiety. Yeah, both were deepened by smartphones. But here's the good news. It's not all negative. Sometimes a kid can get on a screen or the internet and they find a problem in their own community that they could do something about. So let me tell you one of the stories that just illustrates what I'm saying.
Okay.
Virgil, a few years ago, was in the 8th grade, 13 years old. He was playing video games with his friend Kashan one night, late one night, when both boys heard a loud clap outside the window. Now, they're in the same apartment complex, but not the same apartment. That's how we can play video games these days.
Right.
But they heard this loud noise. They looked out the front window and they saw that a storm was coming in. But they both assumed it wasn't that bad. Well, they were wrong. It was Hurricane Harvey. Remember that about 5 or 6 years ago? Well, before he knew it, young Virgil, 8th grade, was up to his knees in water. The apartment was flooding.
Wow.
I love the fact, though, how Virgil responded. He didn't wait for an adult to do something, didn't wait for permission from an adult to do something. He grabbed his phone, he grabbed his mother, and he grabbed his older sister, and he ran them upstairs to get to a higher floor away from the rising waters. And to me, that would be an act of heroism, but it didn't stop there. When he gets upstairs, he gets a phone call from Kashan, his buddy, who says, Virg, we're drowning over here. We need help. Well, once again, Virgil springs into action. He didn't wait for an adult. He didn't wait for permission. Virgil runs right back downstairs to his flooding apartment, grabs an air mattress that he slept on at night, and he used it as a raft. And he paddled over to Kashan's apartment, and he saved Kashan and his whole family, back and forth, back and forth.
Oh.
Act of heroism number 2. But Jeanette, it didn't stop there.
Okay.
As he's paddling back and forth, you can imagine he's hearing the cries for help from other people in the apartment.
Yeah.
He spends the next several hours paddling back and forth, helping people. According to the police report the next day, Virgil Smith saved 17 lives that night.
Wow.
Yeah, he got an award in his city for his act of heroism, and his mother was praised for raising such a fine, brave young man.
Wow. Talk
Well,
about
I love
thinking.
stories like
Yeah.
that.
And he's just
Yeah.
thinking on his feet, too.
That's right. And I think kids in Generation Z and the Alpha generation are more apt to do this today. They have learned about something. I heard one senior in high school say, my teachers are obsolete. And what he meant by that that wasn't being rude. He just thought, yeah, ouch. But he was simply saying, I think I can look up anything you're saying. So we need to empower this generation of kids. They don't need us for information. They need us for interpretation. And Virgil does this incredible thing at 8th grade that I don't think I would have done when I was 40. So anyway, I'll stop there.
That's crazy. And it's true. You said something interesting there about you can look up anything. They just have to be careful about what they're looking up and what sources they're going to, because everything is out there. So Virgil Smith sounds amazing. He's one of the young people that we meet in the book. Anyone else that we can look forward to reading about?
Well, let me do a couple of quick ones that just might be fun for your listeners and viewers. Jimmy grew up in the 20th century, so a few decades ago, and he was an odd little boy. He wasn't like the rest of the boys in the neighborhood. He didn't go out and play ball like the other boys were doing. And at first, his mom and dad said, you need to get out there. You need to get out there. But they were noticing that he loved just playing in his room. Now get this, with his socks. Yes. So they watched him, and he was making them have personalities. And you know what mom and dad decided to do with Jimmy? They thought, well, you know what? He's got an imagination. Let's just get him more socks. Well, Jimmy became the man that you and I know as Jim Henson, created the Muppet.
Oh, okay.
And
So this
so he
goes
made
way back.
Yes, it does. But I love the fact that his mom and dad didn't say, you need to be like everybody else. They said, we're going to fan your gifts into
Stop
flame.
playing with your socks.
Yeah, exactly. Which maybe what I would have said.
Right.
But
But
the
look what
point
it bred
was,
into.
yes. So he creates this industry. So that's another one. I love the story of Anne, though. Anne was a teenager and still is, but a few years ago, she was on Facebook with her pal who lived in the Philippines. They're interacting, and Anne says, how you doing in school? Her friend says, well, not so good. I'm flunking out. Well, Anne said, flunking out? You're smarter than I am. How can that be? And Anne found out that her friend was failing because her house had no electricity. So when the sun went down, she couldn't do her homework. Well, Anne loved science. She had a science fair coming up, and she thought, I'm going to help my friend and submit a project. Anne invented a flashlight that's powered by the body heat from your hand, needs no batteries. And she created this. It actually works. She sent it over to a friend to help her friend, but she also won this incredible award for the science fair. She's now gone on to college, but I'm thinking, I don't think I would have even thought to do that. So, listeners, I know that most of what we hear about kids is negative. They're getting into trouble and their anxiety attacks. But folks, there's some great things going on, and I think we need to tell these stories to inspire our kids whenever we can.
Absolutely. So, I mean, how can we as parents inspire our kids to have long-term vision?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with conversations. I don't know what your experience is, but I think parents today are they feel this generation gap with their screenager and then them. But I'm thinking, what if dinner time once a week? What if bedtime? What if drive time? You just say, let's read one of those stories. And there's 3 discussion questions at the end of each story that you can talk over. And then there's even a link to a video you can watch about Virgil or Anne or Jimmy or whatever. But my hope is these narratives change inside their head, that the world can be changed by someone under 40, that sort of thing. So that's the beginning step. I think we begin that change by telling the right stories, not just kids today,
Yeah.
which is often what we do.
Right. Yeah.
I think those stories begin to reframe what we're thinking about, what we can do for God in our world today. Yeah.
So, Dr. Tim, how can a parent maybe recognize leadership potential in a child?
Yeah, it's a great question and probably one that deserves an hour. Let me see if I can do it justice in 2 minutes. It's my belief that the world is full of 2 kinds of leaders, and every kid in the world fits into one of these 2 kinds. They're either a habitual leader or a situational leader.
Okay, I was going to ask, are we
So
born with it, or can you teach it?
yeah, so it's a little of both. So the habitual leaders are those rare kids that are just natural born leaders. Whatever team they're on, whatever group they're in, they tend to take over. For 20 years, I worked for Dr. John Maxwell. I think John is a habitual leader. I think he came out of the womb telling the doctors and nurses what to do in the maternity ward. But I think that's maybe 1 out of 10. The other 9 out of 10 are what I call situational leaders. That's what I am. And we're the people that would look in the mirror in the morning and go, I'm not really a great leader, but put us in the right situation, one that matches our gifts, our passions, our strengths. In that one zone, I kind of know what to do. I've never taken a class on it, but I'm comfortable. I'm confident. I have influence. We've all seen that little boy, perhaps that's a wallflower. Then we put him on the soundboard. He's come alive. What's happened here? So I think the job of us as caring adults is to help those kids find their situation. They don't even need a badge to lead. They just have influence. And that's what we're trying to build, a world of influencers that know how to solve problems and serve people.
Yeah.
That's our goal.
Yeah. So, how can parents, maybe and adults, use your book to motivate young people to harness their creativity? It's not always easy.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, this is not a simple thing. Conversations are messy. Sometimes kids don't want to talk. But my hope for listeners and viewers today is for the caring adults, whether you're a teacher, coach, parent, to get intentional this year. Let's get intentional. And by that, I simply mean let's put on the calendar. Once a week, we're going to tell a story. We're going to read a story. We're going to talk about it. We'll go back to life as normal the other days, but let's be intentional and redemptive at least once a week. I think we'll be surprised. Well, I'll give you a story. We beta tested this book with several families here in the Atlanta area where I live. One little boy and girl, 12 and 10 years old, the family read one of the stories together at dinner time. The little girl said, "Give me that book," after they were done with one story. She read the rest of the stories over the weekend, started writing down her answers to the questions in the story, and now she's writing her own book. She's 11 now. And so I'm just thinking, we can't plan the outcomes, but we can plan the inputs. What do? Well, we have a dinner. We have bedtime. If you're still tucking your kids in, have a bedtime. Once a week, we're going to do more than just tuck you in. We're going to talk about a story. So I know it's a simple step, probably deserves a better answer, Jeanette, but that's where I would start. Yeah.
That's interesting. And you mentioned she filled out all the questions. Your book does feature a question at the end of each short chapter. So why does it do this? Is it just to build that interaction to get the kids thinking?
Yeah, my goal is to start conversations. And I think you're a 99% chance of at least having a conversation. And then we watch what happens. Maybe a month later, that kid is on their school campus and they see another kid that's lonely or they see a need. And suddenly this story pops in their mind from Lucy or Anne or Jimmy or whatever. And they begin to take action instead of just sitting still and saying, what can I do about that? So, yeah, I really believe there are situational leaders in every one of our kids, if not natural leaders. And I think we don't see it that way. We often just think, well, I just want my kids to graduate, or I just want my kids to stay out of trouble, or I just want my kids to make good grades. That's all good. But
Barely
there's
squeak by.
something more. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Right.
Just get by. So.
We're almost out of time, but really quick, how did you decide which kids to feature in your book? That must have been so hard.
Oh, it was. And so I'm working on version 2 right now. But these 52 stories I picked, I wanted some from history to connect kids to the past, and then some from today. I wanted boys and girls, so there's equal number stories of boys and girls. I wanted different ethnicities, so there's brown, black, white. Because I wanted them to say, we've all got something to learn, we've all got something to teach. So that's how I kind of chose, and it was hard, but I just wanted everybody to find themselves in the book.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us today, Dr. Elmore. It was great having you on today and hearing about these young people that are just so amazing.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Dr. Tim Elmore is the founder of Growing Leaders and is the best-selling author of I Can't Wait, 52 Stories of Kids Who Changed Their World that you can read together. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.